Well, welcome to Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. I'm Debbie Georgiani along here with Jerry Usher, and this is a beautiful new week on Take Two. Take Two is where we take a fresh look at ourselves and the world around us. Well, today we've got a great topic and a super awesome guest with us today, but we're going to examine how we read the newspaper. You know, it's something that just looks so harmless sometimes on the newsstands or in our homes. But can it inspire us? Can it influence us? Can it manipulate us? Well, this is a perfect topic today. But dear listeners, this is a peer-driven ministry, and so it depends on you. We're going to need you to call in and share your experience, share your take at 1-800-585-9396. Jerry, I know you and I have just been talking about this all weekend long.
Been looking forward to it. We are in the media, and everywhere we go, everywhere we look, wherever we turn, we cannot escape the influence of the media unless you become a cloistered Carmelite or a cloistered Trappist monk or something like that. It's all around us. It's part of our lives. And so, dear listeners, we are asking for your take today on the the influence of the media. We've titled the show How We Read Newspapers. We're going to focus a lot on just really what newspapers in particular do to try to draw our attention to certain stories, their use of photographs to send sort of a visual message to us, how they lay things out, sort of the psychology of newspapers. It's a big business. We can talk about bias in the media, and we can talk about really how the church is portrayed in the media. So get on those phone lines at 1-800-585-9396. We have with us arguably one of the top authorities in the Catholic Church in this country on these topics. Her name is Teresa Tomero. You probably know her from her own show, Catholic Connection. She just got off the air a couple of hours ago. She's an author, of course, a syndicated talk show host through Ave Maria Radio and EWTN, motivational speaker. She's got more than 30 years experience in, get this, TV, radio, and newspapers. So she's got a lot of experience in this, and she'll be happy to interact with you with your takes on the program. Teresa, thanks for hanging around your microphone a little longer this morning.
Hey, it's always when you give me a microphone and I just start talking. Thanks so much for having me on. Appreciate it. And congratulations on the new show. You guys sound great.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you. Well, Teresa, the calls are already coming in, and this is what happens on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. The calls come in pretty fast because our listeners really have a lot of experience to share on different topics. So, dear listeners, if you want to jump in, 1-800-585-9396. Teresa Tomero will be with us for the entire show, and she is an expert, like Jerry said, and we're excited to really explore this issue of how we read the newspaper. And Teresa, I just want to ask you real quickly, so many times I will talk to somebody and they'll say, well, I read it in the newspaper. I mean, and so it's like, well, if you read it in the newspaper, it must be the gospel truth. I mean, what can you impart to us about that? Just having that critical eye right at the get-go from picking up that newspaper.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. And even though we have so many different alternative news sources and news outlets available for people now, I think there's that essence that we've grown up with in this culture of, we see the newspapers on the stands. It's just been such a part of our being for so very long, and people automatically assume, even though there's a lot of evidence, and I talk about this in my books and my presentations, so much evidence, and very directly now, for bias, people automatically think, well, if it's in print, then it's true, and prove to me otherwise. What we have to do now, because of all the things we're going to discuss this morning, of how the papers are put together, how media stories are brought to light, how they cover stories, how they eliminate others, this whole thing called spike journalism or spiking stories is another big aspect of it. We want people to be really very discerning when they look at the press. And I say this all the time. I've been on my Facebook page the last couple of days providing people with the truth about a story where we're seeing a similar problem. There's a story out there that says that Pope Francis apparently gave his blessing to an author who is writing books about the gay lifestyle for children. That did not happen. The Pope didn't do that. So I found the truth about it, and I've put the stories up on my Facebook page, and haven't had a chance to cover it on my show yet, but I will definitely do that. We really have to say, okay, especially when it comes, I think anything now, not just church teaching, but even stories, if we're talking about, unless really it's something that's pretty hard to mess up in terms of facts. Let's say you go and cover a fire, or you go and cover, God forbid, a shooting or a crime of some sort. At least you have the police there to say this happened, A, B, C, and D, the who, what, where, when, why, and how that you learn in the basics of journalism 101. But even in so many general stories, the media sensationalize, they eliminate. There's all kinds of biases that go into putting something out there. So whenever it comes to the news, you have to take everything in the secular press, unfortunately, nowadays with a grain of salt.
Our phone number, Take Two with Jerry and Debbie, and Teresa Tomeo with us here, a media expert. We're talking about how we read newspapers. We can talk about other media-related issues as well. If you're a media consumer, and it's about a 99.999% chance that you are in some form, how do you feel treated by the media? Do you think they're fair? Do you think there's some bias out there? How do they portray the church, the priesthood? Pope Francis, for example, Teresa made a mention of that. 1-800-585-9396. I'm going to throw something out here, Teresa, and this may be completely off the wall, but it's kind of how I feel. I don't know if it's how you feel, but being a member of the media profession, I almost liken it to a faithful, say, a pro-life doctor who is, the profession is sometimes disgraced by those who perform abortions and do other unseemly things. Here in the media, our job is to be objective, to report truth and facts, and there are so many in our profession who don't do that. It almost kind of sullies the whole profession a little bit.
Oh, I totally agree. It's extremely frustrating to me. And as a matter of fact, the day the Supreme Court decision came down, June 26th, I received a very interesting email from someone that I didn't even know was listening. And this is a new friend of mine. He's a very devout Catholic who happens to work in a big daily newspaper. I don't want to say where because I promised him anonymity. But he was in the newsroom when the decision came down, and he wrote me an email. I actually wrote a column about this for my Our Sunday Visitor Ion Culture column. And he told me it was absolutely the hardest day on the job in 25 years of investigative journalism. He said the way everybody was running to be the first to react, the columnists who were trying to outdo each other in terms of just saying what a wonderful decision this was, the cheers in the newsroom that went up when the Supreme Court decision came down approving so-called same-sex marriage. And to top it off, if you believe this, the publisher walked into this particular newsroom, and again, this is a major daily newspaper in one of our biggest cities in the country, and this is a listener of mine. He's a journalist. He's been on this staff for years. The publisher walks in and says, we're buying lunch for everybody today. We're popping for lunch in order because we want to honor this historic day in our country.
Wow.
He walks in the newsroom and says this. Now, talk about tainting the industry. What happened to objectivity?
Right.
What does that say to not only all the reporters there, but I was thinking immediately of the interns who are there trying to learn about the craft of journalism, right, the college students? Well, it doesn't matter. It's all about whatever agenda you want to put forward. And this is what's happening, unfortunately, in the majority of our newsrooms now.
Well, Teresa, that's why this topic today is so important for all of our listeners to be able to really understand what's happening and how the media can be biased in so many ways. And so it's important for us to really, I think it also leads into a great, push for Catholic radio to go strong because it's just, it's needed more than ever. But
Right.
Teresa, we got to take a quick break. The phone lines are almost filled up, but there's room for you, dear listener, at 1-800-585-9396. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will jump on the phones and really dive into this subject of how we read the newspaper with our guest today, Teresa Tomeo, and we're so pleased. So stay with us on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. We'll be right back.
"60 Seconds" with Mother Angelica.
Are you and I a friend of Jesus? That's the important one. See? He will never let you down. He will always be forgiving and merciful and compassionate. You can't say that of any friend. So, I have a wonderful friend, and we've been friends for 40 years. Wonderful. I think that's a big grace. Scripture says, if you have found such a one, praise God. But ordinarily, you can't say that you would tell your very heart to this one or that one. To some, it would be like putting it in the newspaper. Be all over town, half hour. Where you wouldn't talk to a friend like that. But with Jesus, you can talk to any friend. You can talk to him as the best of friends.
People you know and trust are on EWTN.
Take Two with Jerry and Debbie on EWTN. Teresa Tomero with us here for the whole hour. She is a media expert. She is the author of a number of books, including Noise, and she has written many, many others. I encourage you to go to her website. It is very easy, Teresa Tomero, Tomeo.com. And T, you and your husband actually have a book coming out together. Am I right about that?
Yes, I'm so excited. Thank you for mentioning it. It's called Intimate Graces, and it's all about the corporal and spiritual works of mercy benefiting your marriage. And so this is the first book that Deacon Dom has written, and I'm hoping that he'll write many more with me. But it comes out in September, and I'll be at the World Meeting of Families, and we'll be having a book signing with Ave Maria Press. And it's interesting, we're talking about the media, because the media are a big part, actually, of what affects marriage. If you look at the influence of pornography, if you look about the culture influencing so many couples who've fallen away from the faith, and how we're addicted. There's another study that came out just last week that shows Americans are addicted to email, and these are all things that affect relationships. So as you said in the introduction, Jerry and Debbie, how it's so insidious, media in our lives, and unless you're a monk or you live underground somewhere and have no media access, all of us are affected by it, and so that's why it's important to talk about the topic.
All right, 1-800-585-9396. Your takes drive the show. I'm chuckling inside, Teresa. You mentioned being addicted to email. I woke up, it's been several months ago now, and I had 38 emails to myself that I sent during the night. Now, I'm not saying that's a pathology or anything, but, that's the thing. God, this is when God gives me all my great ideas, and
Right.
I'm like, Lord, how about between 9 and 5, God? Can we change things around a little bit here? But
Exactly.
anyway, all right, we got a lot of calls for Teresa Tomero.
Oh, good.
Debbie and I are here, and we're going to go to John in Denver first, listening on Denver Catholic Radio. John, welcome to Take Two with Jerry and Debbie, and you're on with Teresa Tomero. How are you, John?
Oh, very good. Thank you. Thanks
Yep.
for taking my call. And last Sunday's gospel, it says, from Jesus, it says, from within, people, from their hearts, come evil thoughts, unchastity, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, licentiousness, envy, blasphemy, arrogance, and folly. I wonder if you just read the Denver Post or watched television, because that's all they that's all they broadcast, okay? The latest murder, hit and run, the stuff like that. There's not too much that's beneficial for our immortal souls. Okay, that's. I just want to make that comment there. And
Yeah, Teresa, what do you think about where John's going with that?
Well, yeah, I think, again, what he's doing is absolutely correct. Is you draw from the Scriptures. What's the Church telling us? What is the Lord telling us in the daily Mass readings, especially the Sunday readings? This is, as you said, the readings this past weekend are a perfect example. And what we do take in can affect us, and it's very important to remember. Now, I always say approach everything with a certain amount, and the Church teaches this beautifully as well, of course, moderation, where, for example, I think if you have young children in the home, it's very, very important to eliminate as much television as possible. And why do I say that? Well, that's what the doctors and the medical experts say, but also from obviously a spiritual perspective. You're trying to form their young hearts and their young minds, but physically, emotionally, it can really have an impact on them, especially their attention span. So when they're really young, it's important to make sure that they are focused and that you have their attention and that they're taught about playing and interacting and not sitting in front of a television all day. Now, as the children get older, they're going to have to balance that because they have to be in the world but not of the world, and so they're going to have to deal with what they see. And even if we do eliminate a lot of the media, we're going to see those things because we have media at the gas station, we have media in the airport. Wherever we go, it's being blasted at us with billboards 24/7. So in the sense of this idea of moderation, we can't just block ourselves from it. We have to learn how to deal with it. And I think we should be able to at least look at the headlines, not get consumed by them, which is John's point, but to make sure that we're understanding it, everything looking, as Al always says, through the lenses of Scripture and the teachings of the Church. I think it's fine to see what's happening in the news, but you have to always apply that discernment, and starting with the daily readings is a great way to go.
I think that was well said, Teresa. And John, I hope that adds to your comments. And we sure do appreciate your call coming in from Denver, Colorado. John, thank you so much for your contribution. You led off Take Two today, and that's always a great thing because guess what? Their phone lines are full. And now that John has moved on with his day, there's an open phone line just for you at 1-800-585-9396. We're going to move right along, Teresa, because we're going to try to get as many calls as possible because you have so much to share and to teach us that we want to hear from our listeners and really explore this subject from all angles. So we're going to go to Tony in Sioux City, Iowa, listening on St. Gabriel Radio. Welcome, Tony, to Take Two with Jerry and Debbie and our guest, Teresa Tomeo. Hi, Tony.
Oh, hi. Sorry, I didn't hear that. Hi. I just wanted to mention, and I hesitate to bring this topic up because I know it's been beaten to death, but I just thought it was striking how with the sex abuse scandal. And again, I hate to bring it up, but I think it's a really important point to make that it was so covered. I mean, it was just covered so much that it gave people, I think, the impression that, a lot of priests are sex abusers and that and of course we know that to be, that it's true that it did happen. But I thought what was interesting is the John Jay report showed that during the height of the scandal, I think it was about 4% of priests could have been involved in that, which is a lot. That's almost 1 out of every 20. But then the U.S. government did its own study. The person who headed that up was Cheryl Shakeshaft, and this was under the Department of Education. They found that the rate of sex abuse in public schools was much, much higher. In fact, the child who was sent to a Catholic school during the height of the Catholic sex abuse scandal was still 50 times safer than a child sent to public schools. But yet that would never be the impression that you've heard. And in fact, when you look at the idea that 4% of priests could have been involved in that, anytime you do a Google search and just try to do some, casual research about sex abuse against children, I think the figure is about 5% of adults either have or will engage in that. And so the media made us think that, well, it's, one of the problems is because, should we take a look at priestly celibacy? Maybe we should get rid of that. Well, the adults who abuse children who aren't priests do it at a slightly higher rate than the priests did at the height of our sex abuse scandal, and yet not taking a vow of celibacy or getting married or having girlfriends, it didn't seem to help them avoid abusing children.
Yeah, so I think what you're saying is a lack of balance and a lack of objectivity, too. And this is what normally happens when you do a story. Well, at least what you learn in journalism school, at least what I learned when I was getting my journalism degree, is that you pull back and you take a bigger perspective and you give people some perspective by doing side-by stories, by looking at the problem in other areas, by comparing what's been done in other areas on a particular issue. So you make an excellent point, Tony, in that none of that, or very little of it, was done. And if it was done, it was mostly done by the Catholic media during the height of the priest scandal. Very, very important. Now, that said, obviously, this is an issue, and the church is always going to be held and should be held to a higher standard. So we can't expect them not to still talk about this. And I think the church has done an excellent job in addressing the issue. And over again, we see bishops, priests, all the way up to the Pope, continuing to apologize for the priest scandal. And I think that's a good thing as well, to always show that we made mistakes and we want to make sure that we're always addressing this issue. But this is a thing that I find really interesting, is that the media will promote the heck out of the church when they think Pope Francis or somebody else is saying or doing something they agree with, right? But then when it comes to something they disagree with, for example, one of the reasons they really went over the top in ignoring the balance issues, as you're mentioning, Tony, is because they think the church should basically cave to the world. They think, since there are opinion surveys, and I talked about this morning on my show, since there are opinion surveys that show that quote-unquote Catholics think the church should change on abortion, marriage, contraception, all these hot-button issues, that the Pope should just say, oh, my goodness, golly, there are all these people who supposedly think this way, so therefore, 2,000 years of teaching has to go out the window. So they think what we teach is wrong, and then when they see something like, a scandal, such as the priest abuse scandal, they say, oh, you're a bunch of hypocrites, don't tell us how to live our lives sexually, but please help the poor, please do this, please do that, and please, talk about climate change and all these things that we like. So they talk out of both sides of their mouth when it comes to the church. They can't have it both ways, but this is what they try to do. So the church is okay when she talks about issues they agree with. The church is all wet and shouldn't even be heard, and there's a bunch of hypocrites when the church talks about the truth of human sexuality, male and female complementarity, the fact that women can't be priests, and of course the other issue is abortion and marriage. So, but that's a very, very important point and a very astute point that you can recognize, and that's what has to be done as consumers of media.
How's that, Tony?
I totally agree with you. I mean, it was a terrible thing. I would definitely don't mean to say that that it wasn't a tragic thing, and that it's a tragic thing anytime it happens. So yeah, moral of the story, obviously, it was a terrible thing that happened within the church, but I do agree with you. I think the church has done a great job addressing it. But I just thought it was amazing how it was sort of used as a stick to kind of beat priestly celibacy with, but yet there was absolutely zero evidence that priestly celibacy had anything to do with it. It was at least an interesting caveat to that whole situation.
Yeah, well, there's an old saying in the news business. It used to be when we used to kind of poke fun at the reporters who were really sensational, but now, unfortunately, it seems to be the way they conduct their business is never let the facts get in the way of a good story. I mean, seriously. And, yeah, they still hit us over the head with that. As a matter of fact, when I was commenting on the same-sex marriage ruling on my Facebook page, all the trolls came out and were talking about how dare the church say anything about this. And they automatically, whenever they disagree with the church on something, they bring up the priest scandal.
Tony, thanks for the call. Appreciate that. 1-800-585-9396. We're talking about media, how we consume it. Do you have any specific sort of cautions that you like to utilize as you approach, say, a newspaper or when you're watching the nightly news, which, I frankly haven't watched a full nightly newscast combined in probably the last 10 years. But how do you consume media? How do you maybe shield your kids from some of the biases that are out there? What about good Catholic media? What are some alternatives that you have found have helped you in your life? 1-800-585-9396. We will get to Daniela and Joan. I just want to wait until the break, which is coming up in about 2 minutes. And Teresa, as we get set for the break, and you'll hear the music coming up in about 2 minutes, but you kind of you alluded to something there that I'd love your thoughts on a little more deeply, and that is the media don't necessarily, well, in some cases they report the news, but to what extent are they, I don't know, is creating the news too strong of a way to put it? You know where I'm going with this?
No, I don't think it's too strong of a way to put it. As a matter of fact, when we come back, it's probably too long to tell before the break, but it's something, actually, I wrote another column about this. It gives me all this material to write and speak about. I had an experience during Holy Week when I was being interviewed by the secular press here in Detroit on the Religious Freedom Reformation Act. They literally invented, and as in they, I mean those who were against the RFRA Act in Indiana. They attacked Governor Pence and all that, but they literally created a scenario that did not exist. It was amazing to me how the media and ran with all the gay activist talking points about RFRA and how RFRA was going to be used to discriminate when there had not been one case, since RFRA had been signed into federal law by a Democratic president back in the early 1990s, President Clinton no less. There had not been one case where it was used to discriminate against a homosexual man or woman. And yet, this is what they were able to put out there, and the media ran with it to the point of even hurting businesses, such as that business in Indiana, that pizza parlor. It was just horrendous to me. And I ended up doing actually 2 instances here in the secular press where I had the opportunity to go on and kind of counter that. But this is where these certain activist groups, where they're very, very tied in with the media. Media believe a lot what they say. They support the media financially, even with the whole Planned Parenthood thing and the undercover videos. There's been some great reports from not only EWTNnews.com, but LifeSite News and LifeNews.com showing the financial connection between many of the major networks and major publications and Planned Parenthood and funding Planned Parenthood. So again, these are businesses, and it's very important to look where their connections are and what they're trying to support. So, yeah, do they create the news? Absolutely. Not all the time, but sometimes, sure.
Well, Teresa, you hear the music, and we're going to take that quick break. And when we come back, we're going to even dive even deeper into this subject about reading the newspaper, really having that critical eye when we are reading the newspaper or looking at our newscasts. So stay with us, dear listeners, on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is John. I know a kid's voice really sticks out on the radio, but it's okay to stand out. As Catholics, we shouldn't be afraid to stand out. We ought to do what's right, even if it makes us a little different from other people. Knowing what's right can sometimes be difficult, but by going to Mass each week, listening to the homilies, reading the Bible, and listening to Catholic radio, it can be easier to stay on track. Thanks for listening, and please tell your family and friends about this station.
Web of Faith 2.0. It's your tried and true source for the interactive answers you need. Father John Trujillo and Father Ken Berganti answer the tough questions from the EWTN.com website.
From philosophy to apologetics to church history, we've heard it all.
But the questions never get old because the truth never gets old.
User-friendly answers in a faith-friendly forum. All new episodes of Web of Faith 2.0 here on the Global Catholic Network, EWTN.
I don't have money to travel, but I can travel the world on EWTN, and I do. God bless each of you. I love traveling the world on EWTN.
If you have a comment about our programming, we'd love to hear from you too. Call 205-795-5773 or send us an email to radio@EWTN.com. Thank you very much for listening. God bless you.
Get an insider's look at the latest information from EWTN. Sign up for Wings, EWTN's weekly email newsletter. Get the latest information about live events, special features, and guests. Connect with EWTN on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Just go to EWTN.com and click on the Wings link to sign up. Don't miss a minute of all that's happening at EWTN. Get your wings today.
As promised, we are back to Take Two with Jerry and Debbie on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. Our guest today is media expert Teresa Tomero, and we are so blessed that she is with us because she is answering so many questions for all of our listeners and our calls that are coming in. And there's just an open phone line for you at 1-800-585-9396. Teresa, before we get to Daniela, who is definitely going to get the award today for patience waiting so long, and before we get to Daniela, I just got to ask you a quick question, real quick, about printing a retraction. You know, when I was younger, I'm turning the big 50 this year, Teresa.
Woo! Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you, and I understand you have a birthday tomorrow, but
yes,
we'll talk about
56
that.
56 years young.
Wow, very good. Well, we'll talk more about that because we want to wish you a very blessed birthday, and we wanted to save that for the end of the show as a special greeting to you. But Teresa, real quickly, printing a retraction. When I was younger, when there was a mistake in the newspaper, they would print a retraction, and it was in a very prominent place. Today, I hardly ever see retractions printed. And if I do, they're printed in places where I probably would never read the paper anyway. What is the deal with that? Do you know?
Well,
yeah.
Again, I think it just goes to the overall aspect of this is a business and they're trying to sell papers, and the last thing they need is more criticism as to maybe their lack of credibility or their news gathering and reporting process. And if it's not going well, and if they have to make a lot of retractions and corrections, then what does that say? Well, it's not worth the money you're paying, obviously. And also, I think there's an agenda there, especially particular stories. I mean, how many times it's been driving me crazy? I can't tell you how many newspaper comment sections I've gone on in the last couple of weeks since the Planned Parenthood undercover videos have broken, and I see the same things repeated. What kind of wonderful reproductive rights health care is going to be missed if Planned Parenthood is defunded? Planned Parenthood does so much great work. They do mammograms. They don't do mammograms. They do referrals. They test for STDs. They offer birth control. They do abortions, and they rarely do adoption referrals. So it just drives me nuts, but those facts are eliminated. And so one of the other ways, in addition to demanding a retraction or a correction, is to make sure you go on those comment sections and comment and put in links and put in websites. And that's what I did. I put in Silent No More Awareness. I put in, the Center for Medical Progress link. I put in Lila Rose's website for live action. Because people watch those, they comment, and they read them, and the newspapers read them as well. They see what the readers are saying. Another way to get corrections in is to always be willing to write a letter to the editor. And some people say, well, my letter might get edited too much, or they may not print it. Well, even if they don't print it, somebody's reading it, and that may be a real means of education for that person inside the newsroom. You may be the only voice of truth for that person, so you never know how that's going to affect them.
Wow. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Wow. Good stuff today, Teresa. Man, you are. And do you have this all in your brain, or do you have notes in front of you? I'm just curious.
No, it's pretty much. I have some notes on statistics on newspaper readership because I know you guys wanted to talk about that, but pretty much it's all in my brain.
Wow. That is awesome. Well, you are definitely blessed. Okay. So as promised, we're going to move right on to Daniela in Lubbock, Texas, listening on Our Lady of Victory Radio. And Daniela, you definitely receive the Patience Award. Welcome to Take Two with Jerry and Debbie.
Thank you so much, Debbie. I am very happy to hear that Teresa is there. I really I enjoy her in the mornings. I wanted to start off by saying that my main source of information is EWTN at home and on the radio when I'm driving to and from work. And last week, we were getting ready with my husband in the morning, and he had the Today Show on. And that whole thing about Ashley Madison was going on, and Matt Lauer starts his news saying that the Vatican had people that were on that controversy. And it really set so bad in my heart. It really just weighed on my heart. He was pointing out and targeting the Vatican when we have so many other mega churches, pastors, and other people that are in the different walks of life. But he decided to use the Vatican as the opening for the news. So that really, it really hurt my heart because it said very bad on me. So I just wanted to bring that up because people need to be more informed and get the information from other places too, and they need to find out about the truth, and that's why I like listening to y'all.
Well, this brings up a point that, first of all, that wasn't even true. There was a lot of misinformation in that story, and LifeSiteNews.com picked up on that right away, and I can see if I can pull the story up, and I actually did post it on my Facebook page, the correction to it. And again, just like the story I mentioned at the top of the hour, where there's many news sources are saying that the Holy Father has now endorsed and in this work done by this children's author who's promoting gay lifestyles in her books for kids. That didn't happen either. What often happens is they will get a smidgen of information that's either not accurate, it's a rumor, and they will build it up on that. And then Jerry and Debbie and I were talking beforehand that what happens is once a major news source puts something out, it builds upon each other. The news media are they have to respond so quickly. We call it, feeding the monster because news is now 24/7. And so what they're doing is they're picking up on wire service stories from AP, from the New York Times, from the Washington Post, the Los Angeles Times. Those major newspapers provide a lot of the major news stories for the press overall. And so when one big outlet starts reporting it, everybody starts reporting it, and then the misinformation just gets repeated and regurgitated over and over again. But whenever you hear a story, especially about the church, stop and say, something's rotten in Denmark, and then go to, as I just mentioned, Catholic sources, including the Register, EWTN News, Catholic News Agency, because we will always have a correction and the truth on there. And news.va as well, which is the Vatican News website, is always really good. But remember that the media do not like the church. They hate our teachings. They can't stand us in many ways. And so they're not going to be, and it's not their job to love us and to promote us 24/7. That's not what we're saying. But getting back to the original, discussion, it's supposed to be, as Jerry and Debbie were pointing out, at least making an attempt, for crying out loud, at objectivity and balance. So whenever you hear anything about the church, especially if it's negative, take a second look.
Thanks, Daniela, for that contribution to Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. We greatly appreciate that. And as Debbie said, thank you again so much for your patience waiting to get on the air at 1-800-585-9396. More stuff we want to get into with Teresa, but Joan has also been waiting very, very patiently in Wichita, Kansas on Father Capon Radio. Hello, Joan. Welcome to Take Two with Jerry and Debbie.
Yes, hi, and thank you for taking my call. My opinion deals with global warming. It's now called climate change. And I noticed in our paper, whether there's a 10-degree hike in Portland, Oregon, in the temperature, or someplace in Germany, that makes the news, but never anything opposing that. And I know they even used the Pope's encyclical. It was definitely slanted, and everything on global warming, which he obviously does believe in, I think, was used as propaganda to promote their cause. And I really kind of dread his visit to the United States for that reason. I think it's going to be so propagandized.
Yeah, and again, I mean, it's very timely, the show that we're having, because hopefully it'll give people an understanding that because there's going to be so much coverage of the Pope in the media over the next month. Tomorrow is September 1st. We've got the World Meeting of Families. He's coming to 3 cities, starting in New York, going to D.C., and then ending up in Philadelphia. Then, of course, he's going right back to Rome for the Synod, which is going on for most of the month of October. This is why, again, that we have to remind ourselves that when we see something in the press about the Church, to take it with a grain of salt and to double-check. And what's so interesting about the Holy Father's encyclical on climate change, if you read it, and at least even if you didn't have time to read the whole thing, if you read the Catholic summaries of it on solid news sources like us, and also, of course, National Catholic Register and the Register bloggers, EWTNnews.com, News Nightly with Brian Patrick. And I'm not just saying this to blow our own horn, okay? I'm saying this because not just about Catholic news, we give you the facts about all the stories, okay? Whether it's a story about an explosion, whether it's a story about the anniversary of Katrina, those of us who are working in these Catholic news entities are professional journalists who were in the media. Brian and I, have been in the media, we always say, since dirt. And so we know how to put a story together, and we know how to question something. There's lots of times when I'm doing my newscast in the morning and I use a secular wire service in addition to the Catholic services, or I'm looking at a story and I'm like, that doesn't sound right. And it could be, again, it could be about earthquakes, it could be about an explosion. And so then I go and I do my own research to try and make sure that the facts are correct. But with the climate change encyclical, it wasn't really, I don't think, an encyclical about climate change more than it was about overall creation. The interesting points that were left out, key points that were left out, is over and over again the Holy Father said you can't, and I'm paraphrasing here, you can't be someone who's an environmentalist and say at the same time you support abortion and contraception. The two do not go hand in hand, and he made very clear distinctions with that. And yet, again, here's a case of the media say, oh, isn't this great? The Pope supports what we want to support, and they pull out the highlights. And sure, that's going to happen, no doubt, in the next couple of weeks, in the next 2 months. But my suggestion, as I said on the air this morning, is always this is opportunity. Let's not just pull from this and say, oh, we got to shut the doors and close the windows and turn off the radio and TV. Let's be astute Catholics, as most of your listeners obviously are with the great questions that they're asking, and let's engage lovingly. But let's know the faith and say, no, wait a minute. Let's talk about this. What did you hear? Here's what actually happened. And then be able to provide the resources to back that up. It's not that difficult because of everything that's at hand right now, but I don't think this is a time for us to pull back. I think this is an opportunity because it's going to be in the news so much.
How's that, Joan?
A little bit of hope.
Very good. Well, you've given us hope by being out there and listening, and thank you for tuning in to Father Capon Radio, AM 1360. I think I said his name right. He was one of the military chaplains whose cause, I believe, is up for beatification. One of the Congressional Medal of Honor winners, if I'm not mistaken, who have been, I think everyone who's ever won that, the chaplains anyway, have all been Catholic priests, like Father Vincent Capodanno and others. So the radio station named after him. Thank you, Joan, for your call. Karen, you're going to be next right after this short break. Then we have some more that we want to ask Teresa Tomeo, our guest. How do we read newspapers? How do we take in media that is just saturated? It was mentioned earlier, you can't even go to the gas pump without being accosted by the media nowadays. I just hate that. So what is your take on this? 1-800-585-9396. It is Take Two with Jerry and Debbie.
This month, the EWTN home video highlight is Fields and Faith, Encounter athletes and sports figures of extraordinary skill and talent with Bob Dolan as they speak about their strong Catholic faith and the important role it plays in their lives. Get your DVD set through the EWTN Religious Catalog web store, EWTNRC.com, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Or call 1-800-854-6316.
EWTN Radio is drawing people of all races, nations, and walks of life to the life of Christ.
My father has a physical disability. Because of that, he cannot always make it to the Mass. Thanks to EWTN's airing the daily Mass, he's right there following along.
With satellite radio, I can listen to any show on EWTN's Catholic programming.
EWTN, truly the global Catholic radio network.
Thank you so much for being with us here on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. You can follow us on Facebook. It's EWTN Catholic Radio, where really you follow all of the great shows, including our guest Teresa Tomero's, her show Catholic Connection, and all of the others as well. Our Twitter account is @Take2Show, and you can just email take2@EWTN.com. We have more for you, T, but we want to get to Karen first, who's been waiting in Lafayette, Louisiana, listening on Christ Our King Radio. Hello, Karen. How are you?
Hello, I'm fine, and I'm glad to be
good
that you took my call.
Anytime. Go right ahead.
I'm on?
It's all yours, Karen.
You are on.
Okay, hello. First, I would like to say I live in Lafayette, Louisiana, and we have a huge Catholic population, and it's really good. In fact, we call ourselves the Holy Land. Because if you go west to Lake Charles or east to Baton Rouge, it's not like that. And we also have a very diverse population from all over the world. But I wanted to comment or ask Teresa about Fox and CNN and I don't know what other channels like that are out there besides the major networks. But I prefer the written word, and I prefer books rather than technology. And my friend watches CNN and Fox religiously, but she also is constantly on the Internet. And to her, if it's on the Internet or one of those channels, it's like the gospel. And I know Internet is not engraved in stone. I know it can't be correct all the time. And I've even had friends in Europe say the news here in the U.S. that we hear from the news channels is not at all what they hear in Europe. And
so is your question, so I understand you correctly, which media to look at, or what's better? What, just so I can answer your question or your thoughts.
Well, I'm just wondering your comment about the networks that stay on all the time, like CNN and Fox and whatever else there is, and the Internet. I listen to Christ the King, EWTN all the time, or I listen to National Public Radio on the PBS channel.
Okay. Well, just my own personal opinion. I think listening to EWTN for the reasons that I stated earlier. Most importantly, of course, because we exist to help evangelize, and we're always going to give you the truth about what the Church says and the magisterium, and we're going to be able to clear up a lot of the misinformation that's out there, especially about church teaching, but also about other key issues and how we as Catholics are to look at the world. That's number one. Number two, I don't think there's any perfect secular network out there. I think Fox does a better job in terms of news-wise of giving voice to some of these stories that nobody else is covering. For example, Fox News has been one of the few networks, including cable and broadcast networks, to cover the Planned Parenthood undercover videos. They're the only one who's done really extensive reporting on it. Now, that said, Fox News and the other networks should have, this is such low-hanging fruit in terms of a possible Pulitzer or any type of other journalism award, because there's so many problems and there's so much information, there's so many testimonies out there of people who have suffered at the hands of abortionists, and not just those in Planned Parenthood. So I would say in terms of covering, giving people who are, let's say, in line more of what we believe with the pro-life issues, you're going to see that more on Fox. But Fox, again, is a broadcast, is a cable network that his biggest interest is in Fox. Okay, it's a business, and they still have ratings to get, and they still have to sell advertising. Again, I think they do a better job than most of covering issues that are important to us, and they do allow a variety of voices on, and they don't make anyone who is conservative or slightly right of center look like an idiot, as they often do on other networks. CNN is okay. I think they're good at breaking news. I think they're good in terms of covering large-scale stories because they throw a lot of people at it. They throw a lot of resources at it. Again, I can't stress enough that you have to take pretty much everything with the secular media now with a grain of salt, because bottom line is they're under more business pressure than ever. Everybody is cutting back. Everybody in every business across the planet is trying to do more with much less. And this really suffers when you're in the industry of disseminating information. And so if you've got fewer people working on still putting them out the same amount of volume, informing the public, that can even affect the way the story is covered or not covered. So there's a lot of things to consider. Now, do I expect everyone to have this kind of detailed analysis every time they turn on the news? No, but in the back of your mind, if you understand how the media operate, and if you always remember that the secular press, it's a business. And NPR, I'm sorry, they get money from the federal government, and they don't operate the same way as some of these other entities do. But NPR is very biased in a lot of their stories, and so they are very good production-wise. They use great natural sound. They use great creativity in actually editing and putting stories together. And they do a lot of good things in depth, but they're also, in terms of when it comes to the culture, right in there with the rest of the secular press. I don't think there's any quote-unquote perfect news outlet out there. I think we shouldn't expect them to be all Catholic or all Christian all the time, but what we should be able to expect, as I keep stressing, is objectivity and at least some attempt at balance. But unfortunately, I can't point to too many networks that make an effort at that. I think Fox does a somewhat better job, but as to some of their hosts and their anchors, I'd like to take them through RCIA. That's just my personal opinion. I think those who are Catholic have forgotten a lot or haven't learned a lot about their Catholic faith. I don't know if that helps you any or not.
Well, does it help, Karen? All good? Okay. Thanks, Karen. We want to thank you so much for calling in today on Take Two. This is good stuff. And Karen, we want to visit Lafayette, Louisiana, because we would like to maybe go to like the local diner and talk with all the Catholics that are all around you. You're very blessed to have all the Christians right around you, Karen. So thank you for your contribution today. And Teresa, this is good stuff. I have to tell you, though, this show moves very fast.
I can't believe it's 10 minutes to the hour already.
Oh yeah, it's just about almost over. And but we promised our listeners we would also address real quickly, and maybe you could do this right now, because I'm actually curious. I know a little bit about it when my job is in marketing, so I actually know a little bit about it. But I'd love to hear your perspective on this idea of going back to print media of newspapers and the layout of newspapers. And what I hear you saying this whole entire time, Teresa, is that we've got to stay aware of what's happening behind the scenes so that we're not duped into being pushed into a certain idea by the media. So tell us a little bit about how the layout of print media and how, they position things to kind of maybe influence or manipulate us.
Right. Well, I think it's important to understand that when you are putting out papers, you want to grab someone's attention with the headlines and with photographs. So the most important stories are always going to be, it's pretty old standby, it's going to be above the fold. And so with that lead story on the front page, and with the pictures, oftentimes they may or may not have a photo to go along with that particular story, but they'll have another particular story that they want to lead you to in another section of the newspaper. And so that's important to remember as well. One thing I want to get across, and I'm trying to do this really quickly because we're limited on time, is even the way photographs, this is very true with video, the way video is shot, but even in photographs, the way photographs are shot can impact, even without saying anything, can put across an entire message, and a message that may not necessarily be true. Let me give you the example of the March for Life. I've covered that now for years for EWTN, for radio and TV for EWTN. What often happens is The media may or may not cover it, probably not, but if they do cover it, they are going to give it very skewed coverage. They're going to say, for example, that both, they're not going to call us pro-life, anti-life activists and pro-abortionists showed up in Washington today to mark the anniversary of Roe v. Wade. Well, excuse me, you've got maybe 50 abortion supporters and you've got 400,000 pro-lifers. Technically, that's correct, but that's a really skewing and generalization of the facts to give you a completely different impression, like it was this little small protest and both sides protested peacefully and they went away. All right? Number two, photographs that are taken. I can't tell you how many times, and I saw this with my own eyes, where I would see the still photographers and the videographers, the camera people from the secular press, they would basically zoom in on the crowd of protesters from Planned Parenthood with their signs, okay? And then they would, they would pull out and they would just show one woman or man from Silent No More. And so they would make it look like there were more protesters from Planned Parenthood or the pro-aborts than there were pro-lifers. So they key in on a certain angle, a certain way, and they make you think that it's a very small crowd or a non-existent crowd. One of my friends, a prominent pro-life activist, was interviewed by the New York Times a couple of years ago, and they sat her down and they told her what to do. They told her to cross her arms and to look really serious. Well, she came out looking like this angry anti-woman hater in the picture. You didn't even have to go to the article because you didn't even want to read it because that's the image you got of this person who's the most loving, wonderful, I don't want to say her name, but just incredible believer and pro-life activist. And yet the way they staged the photographs made her look like somebody who just hates everybody and doesn't care about women, only cares about saving babies. So that's the other thing you have to do. It takes a discerning eye, and this is why it's so important, and I think the first caller who called in, I think his name was Tony, or I can't remember his name, but when he was talking about Scripture. When you are receiving the sacraments, when you're in Mass, when you're reading the daily readings, that is going to help you to discern everything. And it's going to give you the heart of God and to be able to look at everything through the lenses of Scriptures and the teachings of the Catholic Church, which is going to make it very easy for you to spot evil, to spot misinformation, or just in your gut to say, something's wrong here. But they do this so often with print as well as with TV. And I can't stress that enough, the way stories are shot, the way the paper is laid out, but especially in terms of a photograph, they can skew a whole idea of a story.
This is why we like to have a topic like this on Take Two. We take a fresh, unique look at the things that are really part of our daily lives. And Teresa, it has been great having you on the show. We're going to hear the bumper music for 1 minute here in just a few seconds. How can people find out more about you? You got that great book coming out with your husband, who's a deacon, Deacon Dominic. What would you like people to know before we end our time together?
Well, I just am really grateful for this opportunity and just grateful for these great questions, and because people already get this, and it sounds to me, Jerry and Debbie, like they're just trying to fine-tune, and they're really aware. And so I just want to say thanks to our listeners. We have great listeners, and to keep this up, to keep asking these kinds of questions. And if I can help in any way, of course, you can hear me on EWTN every morning, Catholic Connection, 9 a.m. Eastern Time, but you can certainly go to my website, teresatomeo.com. My book with my husband talks a lot about this, Intimate Graces. My latest book, Walk Softly, and Carry a Great Bag, is carrying God with you in the everyday, which helps us discern.
Yeah.
So
Debbie
go to my website, follow me, and like me on Facebook. I try to do a lot of what we're doing right now on my various internet outlets. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank
God
you,
bless
Teresa.
Teresa.
And everybody flood Teresa's Facebook for tomorrow to wish her a happy birthday. It's
Yay.
Teresa Tomero's birthday. Yes, happy birthday, Teresa. Tomorrow's are all about annulments. So stay with us tomorrow as we come back to Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. Until then, have a beautiful and blessed day.